Folks, good afternoon to you. Thank you all very, very much for coming. My name is Robin Huggins, Client Services Director with MBN Solutions. This is a virtual version of a thing that we've been running now for a number of years. Thank you all very much for coming. Today's session is going to be something quite a bit different, and I am hugely looking forward to this. I was mentioning to Sam before you guys arrived, if I wasn't here as your host for today, I would be here as one of the audience, because this is something that I've become hugely aware of over the last couple of years, particularly the last 12 months, the importance of mindfulness to leadership. Absolutely delighted that Sam's here today. Sam's going to do her own intro. The bits that you guys need to think about are, number one, Sam's session's going to last roughly 45 minutes. If there are any burning, pressing questions for Sam during that time, please pop them into Q&A, but otherwise, Sam's happy to do a little 10-15 minutes at the end where she will address any of your questions. I'm going to be here for the duration. If you need to talk to me, chat, or as I say, pop something into Q&A, I'll pick up things after 45 minutes and I will see you all then. Sam, I'm going to go dark. I'm going to switch the mic off, the camera off. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to listen. Thank you very much. And if you've got any hassles, just give me a holler and I'll pop back up and sort them for you.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you, everybody, for taking time on this Monday to come along and listen to me, and actually well done to you for making time to take some time out, and I hope you'll get something from the session today. So just a little bit about me. I've worked in digital innovation my whole career. I've also been a long time yoga and meditation practitioner, and about 4 years ago, I decided that I really wanted to deepen my meditation practice. So I began a journey of doing an MSc in mindfulness and compassion, which I completed last year. So I did that whilst doing a full-time job, running a family, doing all the other things in my life. And I very much applied that academic learning and the papers that I wrote to leadership and innovation, because that's what I'm really interested in, and how mindfulness and compassion can help us with that. So I am now also a trained mindfulness teacher with the Mindfulness Association, and I am practicing my mindfulness every single day, and I have and continue to reap the benefits that that brings to me as a human being, as a leader, as an advisor, as a parent, as a partner, and as a friend. I continue to reap those benefits of the work that I put into that. So what I'd like to do today is, well, firstly, I'd like to ask you to bring an open mind, because I am going to guide a couple of practices, in fact 3 practices. So I'll guide you through those. So just bring an open mind to that. So I'm going to talk a bit about mindfulness. Some of you, I assume, may already know, but I'm going to talk about what it is and what it isn't. I'm going to talk about how training the mind can be quite transformational, and touch on a bit of the science to back it up. And I say a bit of it because I'd need probably a few months to really take you through all of that. What we're going to explore and understand is we're going to get to understand a little bit more about our mind, and identify our unsettled mind, and learn how we can settle the mind. So I want to give you some practical ways to do that. I want to talk about mindfulness and leadership, and I'm going to share some of the research findings from my dissertation as well. So let's talk about what mindfulness actually is. And I think it's helpful to think about what it's not, and dispel the myth that it's about emptying the mind, and it's about just sitting there and, you know, getting an empty mind and getting rid of thoughts. And it's not about that. In fact, it's not about trying to do anything. It's not about doing, it's about learning to be. So it's about getting to know the mind, getting to know more about ourselves. And the definition that I use with mindfulness is that it's knowing what's happening while it's happening without preference. So it's about noticing what's going on right now, but not having a preference for it, whether it's good or bad or neutral, not having a preference for it. So essentially what we're doing in mindfulness practice is we're training the mind. And yes, we can train the mind. So if you think about distraction, which we all suffer from, and one of my tutors, Choden, who's written a number of books, is a Buddhist monk as well. Even he suffers with distraction. So distraction's a habit, right? We spend our time engaged in our thoughts, thinking about things and not necessarily planning to think about those things. And that's quite often where we place our focus. And actually, energy follows focus. So what that does is it feeds more energy into the habit that we can have of thinking when we don't even realize that we're necessarily thinking. So in our mindfulness practice, and as we develop mindfulness, we can withdraw from thinking activity and develop a new habit of being present. So if you think about yourself right now, in this very moment, you are probably okay right now. You're probably okay. You're not shackled in a dark cellar somewhere. You're not, I assume, in huge amount of pain. You're actually okay right now. So it's, if we can develop that habit of being present and become aware of our thoughts, but not caught up in them, then it can be incredibly helpful. And I'll come on to that a little bit more. What I'd like to do, first of all, is just do a short practice where what you're going to do is notice the unsettled mind. So what I want you to do is just begin by setting an intention to do nothing and just follow my instructions. Okay, so just sit where you are, wherever you are, keep your eyes open and just do nothing. Other than breathe, of course, just do nothing. So I just want you to check in and notice, where was your mind? Were you doing nothing or were you thinking? So again, set an intention, not trying to meditate, not trying to do anything. You're doing nothing. Keep the eyes open and just sit. So did you manage to just do nothing? Were you thinking? And if you were thinking, were you planning to think, or did those thoughts just come up? So one more time now. Set an intention, get comfortable, and you're going to do nothing. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. No planning. Just reflect on what happened during that very short period, just over 2 minutes. What did you notice? So, a bit of a news flash. You do not control your mind. I do not control my mind. Our mind does whatever it wants to do, whatever we allow it to do. And here's another one. You're not your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. Just allow that to land a moment. Your thoughts are just events that are playing out in your mind. They are not happening right now. So in our mindfulness training, what we're actually doing is we're going on an inner journey. And we're going on an inner journey to train the mind. And whatever arises in the mind, that's okay. Remember, without preference, we don't judge it, we just get curious about it. And that's what we're working with in mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is actually a faculty. It's a capability that we can all develop. It's within us all, and it's sat there like a muscle. But like our muscles that are there, whether you've got lovely, beautiful, big, firm, defined muscles, or if you haven't, they are there, and you can develop them and make them lovely, big, beautiful, whatever the adjective it is that you can relate to. And what we do in our mindfulness is we are setting our intention and our motivation for our practice, and that holds us in our practice. But it is a capability that we can all develop. The number of times that colleagues, people over the years say to me, I'm so distracted, I've just got such a busy mind. We all do, but we all have that capability to develop that stillness. So what we just did there in that really short practice was a practice to recognize the unsettled mind, the monkey mind, or the butterfly mind, as we can often call it in mindfulness, that just sort of floats away on, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to go there, and we don't even realize it's happening. And what we can do through our practice is we can learn how to settle the mind so it is available to us. And then as we learn to settle the mind, that creates space for awareness. And that's where the really interesting stuff can start to come, and we learn more about ourselves and the things that we do that maybe aren't really helping us. So our thoughts, we're not our thoughts. And all thoughts, they follow a standard cycle. There's a moment of arising, a moment of enduring, and a moment of passing. And if we can learn to leave our thoughts, that's what will happen. They will still come, because remember, it's not about getting rid of them. And they will endure for a while, and they will pass. And I think that's something I'd really like you to take away today. Thoughts will come, they'll hang around a bit, and they will go. But if we grab those thoughts, they will endure more. And that's when they can have the ability to maybe not be very helpful and very constructive to us in our lives. So what mindfulness gives us is the opportunity to develop that awareness into who we are and how we live our lives on the inside, in here, and all these things that we play through. Joseph Goldstein, who is quite a guru when it comes to mindfulness and meditation, he developed the Insight Center in Massachusetts, been doing this since the 1960s, talks about how strength of mind is power. And that's not about the power to manipulate, but the power of what he calls penetrating insight, the power to understand ourselves. And as the mind becomes more concentrated, that develops. Now, during these times of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, as leaders, as people in the workplace, trying to get through our day's work, but also trying to do a great job, this can be incredibly helpful. And what it can give us is the opportunity to be free, and to be free from some of these habits and behaviors that actually really aren't helping us. Edith Eger, you may be familiar with, Holocaust survivor and author who wrote The Gift, talks about change, right? And I really like this quote. And I've worked in change, transformation, didn't call it that for most of my career to date, but I've worked in change my whole life. And of course, we're all going through change all the time. You know, this moment and the next moment are very different. And she talks about how change is about noticing. It's about noticing what's no longer working and stepping out of the familiar, imprisoning patterns. And that's what mindfulness can allow us to do, is to notice, because these things are happening, but often we don't notice these same cycles that we can go through. And that's what our practice can give us. So as I said, all thoughts follow this standard cycle. They'll arise, they'll endure, and there's a moment of passing, as long as we leave them alone and we don't try and cling to them. We're often unsettling our mind through entertainment, you know, whether that's having a cup of coffee and going off and thinking about that, or you know, getting immersed into the next Netflix box set, and before we know it, 10 hours have passed and we haven't achieved what we wanted to. And we have this constant need for information and stimulation, and we're always on, and we're not recognizing that we're always on. So that can be quite unsettling to the mind. And it can also, we're also unsettling our mind through what we call reactivity. So rather than responding, taking a pause and responding, we're reacting, where we can often be recalling a memory that's happened. Maybe it was a meeting that we didn't feel great in, a conversation that we had, and we go back through it and we ruminate, and we're just reliving this experience. And in reliving this experience, it's creating this unsettling, and through that we're not creating good physiological responses in the body as well, but we're reliving something that's happened. It's not happening right now, but that's what we do. And through our mindfulness training, we get to notice when we're doing that. We develop the awareness that we're having that thought, and we can bring ourselves back to the present moment. And through the cultivation of mindfulness, we can learn to let go of certain situations. You know, a classic one is if you drive, getting cut up in a car, and drivers come across you, or they've gone through a light, or done something that really annoys us. And then we kind of create this whole story, and we're thinking about them, and we're getting really angry, and creating the stress in our body. And by the time we've got to our destination, where we might not be feeling in a good place, when actually, who knows why that person did that, and they had their reason. And again, through this cultivation of mindfulness, we can learn to let things go and not react, and actually respond and take a pause and think, just let it go, because it doesn't really matter. And it's not about being a doormat or anything like that, but it's just about learning to notice when these things happen and let them go. So what I'd like to do next is just guide a short practice, which is settling the mind. And all you need to do is get yourself into a comfortable posture. And feel free to close your eyes if you would like to. And when you're gonna hear the sound from the singing bowl, which is going to indicate the start of the practice. And you will hear it 3 times as I end the practice. And all you need to do is just follow my instructions. Okay, so just beginning with getting yourself into a nice, comfortable posture. So that's relaxed but dignified. So you're not slouching, you're being kind to your body, relaxing the shoulders if you need to. And just imagine if you're sitting in a chair that there's this lovely golden thread that's just pulling the head up, so it's sitting really nicely and kindly on the neck and on the shoulders. Closing the eyes if that's comfortable. If you prefer to keep your eyes open, then take the gaze down so you're not distracted by anything visually. And just begin by noticing the breath. Where are you noticing the breath? You might be noticing it in the belly, the rise and fall. Pop your hands there to tune into that, if that feels comfortable. Or you might be noticing it more through the nostrils, and breathe in through the mouth or the nose. No rules here, whatever works for you. And then as we work on settling the mind, it might be helpful to count the breath, maybe in for 3 or 4, just gently counting in your mind, and out for 3 or 4. So we're using the counting and the breath just to anchor the mind. You might prefer a phrase, which is, I know I'm breathing in on the in-breath, and I know I'm breathing out on the out-breath. Equalizing the breath. And if your mind is taking you away, just gently invite it back to the breath and the counting or the phrases. And on the next exhale, just allow the exhale to deepen a little more than the inhale. Let go of the counting and the phrases. And just allow yourself to drop into the body. Just see if you can tune into any physical sensations that might be present in the body right now. And if you've noticed that thoughts are appearing, or you've got caught up in them, again, just ever so gently and kindly invite the mind back to the breath and tuning into the body and whatever might be present there. Grounding into the body. It can be quite nice to place the feet on the ground and just to allow the earth to support you. So we've got the body resting on the ground, and we're just allowing the mind to rest on the body. settling the mind. Whenever you notice that you've got distracted by thoughts, got caught up in thinking, that's the practice happening, because that's awareness. That's noticing that it's happening, and then just bring it back to the breath. Okay, so just coming back to the room. So why do we practice? And as I've said, this is about training the mind, but just think for a moment, reflect for a moment. How often do you find yourself doing one thing whilst thinking about something else? How often do you find yourself maybe dwelling on the past, rerunning those videos, those stories of the past, or worrying about the future and something that hasn't happened yet and may never happen? So how does it make you feel to live this way? Maybe it creates feelings of stress or a drop in mood. And maybe you'd like to find a different way of relating to your thoughts and emotions and become more accepting, more kind to yourself, and less reactive, less going into that red zone. And that's what developing the mindfulness capabilities can do. There are numerous benefits. It can enable us to appreciate the richness of our moment by moment experience rather than glossing over it or not even realizing it's there as we race through our lives on autopilot. I know through lockdown and working at home, more and more of us manage to get outside and go for walks during our workday, which is amazing. But have a mindful walk, see what's going on around you, notice what's going on around you rather than running through what's just happened. That doesn't mean not planning, but it's about knowing and being aware of what you're doing. It can enable us to become more kind, less critical to ourselves and others, and that can be really quite transformational. And it can allow us to be less reactive, as I said, and less likely to hurt ourselves or others through destructive emotions because we've become so much more aware. And really what it can do is enable us to improve our relationships because we notice more about how we are behaving. We notice more about people around us. By becoming more present, we can become more responsive. And that can be phenomenal. And I've experienced it myself and continue to, in terms of what that can do for our relationships. So this isn't a woo-woo topic. There is quite a bit of science out there, and I just wanted to share a little bit of that today, given the time constraints that we've got. Amishi Jha, Dr. Amishi Jha, I should call her, is neuroscientist and professor of psychology at Miami University. And she's done a lot of work in her lab around attention. And her mission has been to scientifically determine how we can harness the full power of our attention to better meet everything that life demands. And her research, she's done a lot around first responders in particular, has revealed that a minimum of 12 minutes a day of focused attention, a focused sitting practice can really help our attention. Now, if you do more, it adds even more, but that's as a minimum. And that's one of the questions people always ask me is, how long do I need to do this? Well, that's the minimum. And she, through her research, has talked about it as taking the flashlight of our attention, you know, shining a flashlight on where we want to be. And if we bring that to our work context, so that flashlight, whether you want to direct it towards an email or something, a report that you've got to write, you know, when we're not aware, that flashlight just gets moved around by other content. And if you're not checking in regularly with where your attention is going, so the chances are, you know, maybe you don't even notice that you're off task. And that's what that mindfulness, that faculty enables us to do that. So, and soon enough, you know, what we can notice is that our performance is compromised because we're allowing ourselves to be so distracted of not even noticing that we're distracted, because there's a distinct difference there. So focusing is actually a decision, and I think you're all aware of that, but actually refocusing is a skill. So, and what that skill requires is awareness of what is happening. And through mindfulness practice, you can train to make that awareness stronger and more available to you on demand. So you might also be aware of neuroplasticity, which is simply put, physically increasing the grey matter here, and you know that the brain changes, right? It does change, and the part of the brain that's associated with learning, memory, emotional regulation, self-referential processing and perspective, these are all critical skills for leaders. And when we're attempting to maintain our equilibrium under constant pressure, and through training the mind, through our mindfulness training, we can change our brain. So basically what we put in is what our brain will learn. So just think about your habits. Are they changing your brain in a good way? Or are they changing it in a bad way? Are you developing this distraction as a habit and as your way of being? So in our sort of distracted world and our frenetic work life environments, we can tend to rewire to be even more distracted. But through training the mind more deliberately, more intentionally, we can become more focused. So essentially, whatever we do is what our brain becomes. But we can rewire our brain throughout our lives. And as leaders, as humans, as people, as all these things, all these roles that we are, we can learn to better manage our mind, and that can be hugely inefficient. So as the context here today is leaders, if we allow ourselves to be constantly impatient and stressed, then, and we're not kind to others, then that's the brain that we get. But if we place greater value on creating and managing our mind in ways that are beneficial to us as leaders and the people that we lead, then what's going to happen? And there's research to back this up. We get more engagement, we get higher productivity, and moreover, everybody is happier. So with that mindfulness of a minimum of 12 minutes a day, the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that contributes to that focused attention, is strengthened. So, you know, this can really help us to improve our leadership. And I think the fact that you're here today, well done. But it starts with identifying the habits that we want to change. And in order to do that, we need to become truly open to our introspection and go on that inner journey and understand how we behave and get to understand ourselves a bit more. So the body of literature and mindfulness and leadership reveals that it can really influence transformational leadership, which is an approach that causes change in individuals and social systems. It can support leaders in adapting to change, and also our followers in adapting to change. And also it can facilitate task focus, you know, that attention and that ability to focus. I'm conscious of time, but I would love to share a little bit of my own research that I conducted as part of my my MSc. So I wanted to look at what mindfulness could do amongst a group of 10 female leaders, and I was exploring self-promotion, which generally, and I can say this as a female leader myself, we're not so comfortable with as female leaders. So I wanted to understand the impact that mindfulness could have generally, and then more specifically, on these leaders in the workplace and their ability to lead and how they saw themselves. They practiced mindfulness every day for 8 weeks, and I got them to keep a journal so that they could just get into the habit of just writing down their thoughts and their experiences, not only that emerged through their practice, but reflecting on the day and reflecting on how they were feeling right then. And a number of themes came out which were really interesting. And I could go into this another time a lot more deeply. Basically, their self-confidence increased and self-efficacy. Now, self-efficacy is your ability to know that you can do that task and you can do that well, which is really important in the workplace, because there's loads that we can actually do, but actually, we're not always telling ourselves that or realizing that. So that increased. They increased in empathy and compassion for others, and they also developed self-compassion as well. So being able to increase compassion is really important as a leader. And what happened was they started to see their people a lot more, see them, as in who they were, and that increased the connection. And that's what leadership is about at the end of the day. They developed a greater inner calm and clarity, which impacted on this sort of confidence, this self-efficacy, this ability to know that they could and were doing a great job. And they felt more in control. And that control brought that calm, or the calm brought the control, whichever way you would want to look at it. And they were actually able to say no more because they felt, they recognized their past performance, the stuff that they've done well, and therefore that it would indicate that they will have a good future performance as well. They became much more attuned to their emotions. Now, emotions are really useful data that can help us to make better decisions and help others. So even to negotiate, and from recognizing our emotions, we can make rational decisions because we can notice if that's emotional as well. They developed a greater interest in self-care, making time for themselves, as they could really understand and see the value of doing that. And they actually got really interesting feedback from their team around how they had noticed differences in them. They developed an increased ability to let go of things, let go of the things that they couldn't control, that were eating them up, that were creating unnecessary stress. And that was incredibly powerful for them. And then finally, and I appreciate I've shared a load of stuff there, what came up was just the appreciation of the simple joys in life. So not the big holidays or those fleeting things, but seeing the simple things like the green leaves on the trees, or noticing an image that made them smile, and just allowing themselves to be present with the simple joys. So, some first-hand experience from my own primary research of what it did for those leaders who put the practice in over those 8 weeks and developed their journal. So very interesting and very much aligned with the body of literature that's out there. So I'm very conscious of time, and I do want to guide a final practice with you. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to guide something that's called a 3-minute breathing space, which is exactly what it says. And it's something that you can access at any time because it's very simple, as most of the practices are. It's about making the time and thinking, do you know what? I'm about to go into that meeting, or I'm about to do this really focused piece of work, or I'm going to do something in my personal life, and I just want to give myself a breathing space, because the space that can create can be incredibly beneficial in terms of what comes next. So come into your posture, a comfortable seated posture. Close your eyes if that is working for you, and just listen to my instructions. So just start with your posture, just getting comfortable, thinking about how the shoulders are, maybe just popping the hands in the lap, just noticing the sensations, and maybe just taking a moment to check in with how you're feeling right now. And that's both physical sensations and any emotions that might be present for you right now. Not trying to get rid of anything, not trying to block anything, just noticing. And then narrowing the focus to your breathing, noticing the rise and fall of the belly. Maybe popping your hands there if that's comfortable. You might notice it more at your chest or your nostrils. And then moving from that narrow focus of the breath and where you're noticing it, to broadening it to an awareness of the whole body, on the chair, on the surface which you're sitting, feet on the ground, and the whole body breathing as one. So the 3-minute breathing space can be a bridge between our formal and informal mindfulness practice. Very accessible, hopefully, as you've seen. And you could maybe set yourself a reminder, whether it's a post-it on your computer or something on your phone, just to take 3 minutes out and just get in touch with your experience in the moment. And it can be quite good for if you are facing into some difficulty, that you can feel more ready. And it can help us to respond more skillfully to difficult moments where we're not reacting, we're not on autopilot, and we're not following our habitual patterns. Okay, so going forward as leaders, so I think regardless of the daily introspective practice you choose, The pursuit of mindful leadership will help you to achieve clarity about what's important to you. And that's really important, that clarity of what's important to you and a deeper understanding of the world around you. And mindfulness will help you to sweep away trivia and needless worries that take up so much of your time and energy about unimportant things. If you develop a regular practice, it'll help you to nurture passion for your work and compassion for others, and really help you to develop the ability to empower the people that you lead. Like everything, you have to practice. And I'd just like to finish with a quote from the philosopher Nietzsche. There is more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophy. And when you go on that inner journey, you will be able to tap into that inner wisdom. So thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing this space with me. And I hope that you found that useful. Thank you.
That was amazing. That was just amazing. Thank you so much. Wilfred's popped in. Thanks for the session. Most helpful, meditating daily on weekdays. Thank you again. I'm going to make a promise to myself here that I'm going to get back into a little bit of mindfulness. Questions that had popped into chat. If anybody has any questions, I've got one right away. Just to kick the ball off. You mentioned earlier on, I'll paraphrase you here, about worrying about the future, dwelling on the past and worrying about the future. But when talking about the leadership mindset, I would like to understand what, if you could give me some guidance, please, about striking the balance between good planning and being prepared and worrying about the future. Because I personally, I see it as almost like it's part and parcel of the same thing. I worry about the future, so I plan, but I know I need to remove those slightly harmful thoughts, worry. So any way I can strike the balance so that I'm mindful of what's happening in future and I can plan for it, but I'm not worrying too much about it.
Yeah, and I think there you go. You've answered it there. And I think it's about being intentional about planning, but it's not about the worry that's driving that brings you back to the worry of what might happen in the future. It's kind of, I am going to set a plan for the future and I'm aware of what might be going wrong and I'm going to plan accordingly, versus, well, what about, I'm going into this next meeting and, this might happen and she might say this or a client might do that. And it is about being prepared. And then it's about sort of letting it go, really, and knowing that you've got it. But it's not about, like today, I came here and thought about what I'm going to talk about. I didn't just kind of go, oh, I'm just going to allow it to just come to me. Now, we can allow things to come to us, but I planned for it. And of course, the planning is what can bring the peace as well. But it's not about that. We're constantly trying to predict the future and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And we don't know. All we can do is tap into our wisdom and our knowledge and work with our colleagues around us to develop a plan, but not getting taken too much and creating unnecessary stress around what might happen. If that makes sense, does that help?
It does. Thank you. Questions come in here from Megan. Megan, thank you. Can you talk a bit more about the process of journaling alongside practicing mindfulness? Where can we read more?
Well, I think I journal, and I think what's helpful about that is getting your thoughts down on paper. And I am talking paper, and I'm a digital person, right? But I think there's nothing quite like it. What came through my research also was that the participants, when they went back through their journals, when I was checking in with them and seeing what's going on, they noticed that some of the things that they wrote down at that time, they disappeared. Some of the concerns and the fears and the worries that they had at that time, a few weeks or days later, they didn't come to fruition, they didn't happen. So they were really getting an insight into these things. But I think that journaling again, it helps us to, certainly for me, and there is research to support this, it helps us to understand more about ourselves, and just getting these thoughts out on paper, because it's the writing, but then it's the reading, and I can go back over years and just look at things, and it, you know, like I said, there's research to prove that it's really, really helpful. And again, it's a habit, and it doesn't matter if you miss it the next day or you don't do your practice the next day, you start again. You know, we talk about the beginner's mind, but yeah, it really is a good practical thing to do, and really helpful to look back as well and read through it.
Okay. I've got another quick shout out there if anybody has any final questions, but just a point that you made earlier in the session, Sam, that I just want to kind of explore again in more detail. We are not our thoughts, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. And then you spent a bit of time talking about they're coming, they're enduring, and then they're passing. Now, I've in particular had an issue or a challenge with that my entire adult life, learning to separate. We are not our thoughts. For myself and for anybody else listening, and any guidance you could give on that, any little techniques or any more understanding you could give on that, because I think it can be very, very difficult to separate the two.
Yes. So I think that's practice, right? So it's not going to happen overnight, and it's an ongoing journey. And I think through our practices is where we develop our awareness, and that self-awareness to notice that, hey, that's a thought. You know, that is not happening to me right now. And the more that we do that, then the more we start to notice, and I'll notice it, and I'll notice it in my life now when I'm off the cushion, as we say, that, hey, I'm thinking, I got some news this morning that wasn't great. And I started to kind of go off, but I noticed that it was happening, and it was a thought. And in this moment right now, right then, I was okay. I was sat here in my study and everything was okay. You need to develop that faculty, like I said, that capability, and that will only come. There's no shortcut to this, I'm afraid, folks. You've got, you know, just like running a marathon, right? And the minute you stop and you've trained for that marathon, you've done it, and you stop, your fitness goes down. You have to keep at it, but you really will start to see, because it's not just about your formal practice, it's developing that capability so that when you are in your daily life, you will notice that actually those are thoughts. I can see that. I can see what's going on there. It's not really happening.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. I can't show you because if I move the camera, he's going to move, but I'm giving off such mellow energy. That cat has came in and he's right beside me now.
If you tune in, I've got two dogs behind me doing the same thing.
Mellow energy in the room. Sam, what can I say? It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. It's given me a lot to think about, and I'm going to make that little pledge, as I said, and I really like the way you've ended it there, and my last notes here are, you have to keep practicing. I'm going to make the little pledge that I'm going to start practicing again, because it's been absolutely brilliant. So firstly, thank you to everybody who's attended today. I'm hopeful you got as much out of this as I did. Thank you so much for your questions, for your comments, your observations and your thoughts. It is appreciated. Huge thanks to Sam. Sam, thank you so much. You've given something to the community that, thank you. It is appreciated. Appreciate your words, appreciate your thoughts, and hopefully we will do this again sometime soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.